You scroll, you hesitate, you skip past dozens of new options, and then, without thinking, you choose something familiar, a story you already know, a scene you've seen before, a voice that doesn't demand anything from you. Before the story even begins, your breathing softens. This reaction is not random. It's neurological. Your brain is not searching for entertainment in that moment. It's searching for safety. To understand why familiar stories calm the brain more than new ones, we need to understand how the brain reacts to uncertainty. The human brain evolved in environments where unpredictability often meant danger. Unfamiliar sounds, unknown faces, unexpected changes. Survival depended on constant scanning. That survival system still runs today. Every time you encounter something new, your brain quietly asks, "Is this safe? Do I need to prepare? Should I stay alert?" New stories activate this system. Even when a new show is enjoyable, your brain is working, learning characters, tracking plot, predicting outcomes, preparing for emotional shifts. This creates mental tension, subtle but real. Familiar stories do the opposite. The moment your brain recognizes a known narrative, the threat detection system relaxes. There's nothing to solve, nothing to defend against, nothing to brace for. The brain already knows the emotional terrain, and predictability to the nervous system feels like safety. This is why familiarity doesn't reduce emotional depth. It increases it. When the brain isn't busy predicting, it becomes present. You notice expressions you missed before. Pauses feel heavier. Silence speaks louder. The story slows you down instead of pulling you forward. New stories pull attention. Familiar stories hold it gently. That difference matters. There's another layer most people don't consider: cognitive load. Your brain has limited processing energy. During the day, it's spent on decisions, conversations, self-control, problem solving. By the time evening arrives, mental resources are depleted. New content demands effort. Familiar content requires almost none. This is not avoidance. It's efficiency. Your brain is choosing the option that restores balance with the least cost. Familiar stories also change how emotions are experienced. In new narratives, emotions are unpredictable. You don't know when loss will appear. You don't know how intense it will be. You don't know how long it will last. That uncertainty keeps emotional defenses active. But with familiar stories, the ending is known. Sadness becomes contained. Tension feels temporary. Joy feels reliable. The brain allows deeper emotional access because control is preserved. This is why people often cry more easily during familiar scenes. Not because they're weaker, but because they feel safe enough to feel. Memory plays a role too. When you return to a familiar story, your brain isn't just replaying a narrative. It's reconnecting timelines. Who you were when you first saw it, where you were, what you were carrying emotionally at the time. These memories blend with the story itself. So watching something familiar isn't just watching. It's revisiting. The brain experiences this as continuity, and continuity stabilizes identity. This matters more than ever because modern life overwhelms the brain with novelty, endless updates, infinite choices, constant stimulation. The nervous system rarely gets a break. Familiar stories become psychological anchors in that chaos. They don't demand growth. They don't test identity. They don't ask you to adapt. They simply exist reliably. And reliability is calming to a system designed to survive uncertainty. What most people don't realize is that this calming effect happens before conscious thought, before logic, before preference, before explanation. The body responds first. Heart rate shifts, muscles release. Attention narrows gently instead of scattering. This is regulation, not nostalgia. And it explains why, even when you promise yourself to try something new, your hand still reaches for the familiar. Because the brain remembers something you don't consciously track: how it feels to finally rest. There's a quiet truth most people never articulate. Familiar stories don't just calm the brain. They give the mind permission to stop performing. All day, your brain is expected to adapt, to adjust its tone, to manage impressions, to regulate reactions. But familiar stories don't watch you back. They don't evaluate. They don't surprise. They don't demand emotional agility. They allow you to exist without adjustment, and that is rare. Neuroscience shows that when predictability is present, The brain shifts out of constant alertness and into a restorative state. Stress hormones decrease. The nervous system stabilizes. Mental noise softens. This is not passive entertainment. It's active recovery. In familiar stories, the brain knows where it can relax and where it can feel, because nothing threatens to overwhelm it. This is why familiar narratives often feel emotionally cleaner. Not because they lack depth, but because emotional boundaries are known. You know when sadness will arrive. You know when relief will follow. You know nothing will spiral out of control. That knowledge creates emotional trust, and trust allows openness. There's also a subtle psychological reassurance happening beneath awareness. Familiar stories remind the brain, I've been here before, and I survived. This is especially powerful during times of change, stress, or emotional uncertainty. When real life feels unstable, predictable narratives quietly reinforce resilience. They prove that tension resolves, that conflict passes, that meaning still exists, even if only for an hour. Another overlooked reason familiar stories soothe the brain is identity reinforcement. Every story you return to reflects something about you. What you notice changes. What resonates shifts. What hurts deepens or fades. The story stays the same. You don't. That contrast allows reflection without confrontation. Growth without pressure. You're not being told who to become. You're noticing who you already are. This is why people revisit stories during life transitions. After loss, during burnout, in moments of uncertainty, the brain seeks stable reference points when internal narratives feel unclear. Familiar stories become mirrors, not escape routes. They hold emotional memory without judgment. Modern culture often frames repetition as stagnation, as if revisiting the known means avoiding growth. But psychologically, repetition can be grounding. It's the difference between being stuck and being supported. New experiences expand us. Familiar ones stabilize us. And both are necessary. The danger isn't returning to familiar stories. The danger is never allowing the brain to rest long enough to integrate experience. Without rest, novelty becomes noise. Familiar stories provide a rhythm the brain understands. They slow time. They soften edges. They reduce the urgency to react. And in that slowed space, the brain reorganizes itself. This is why the calm from familiar stories lingers. It doesn't disappear when the episode ends, because the brain wasn't distracted. It was regulated, and regulation restores clarity. So when someone asks why you rewatch the same stories again and again, the answer isn't boredom. It's wisdom your nervous system learned before language. You're not choosing repetition. You're choosing balance. You're choosing something that doesn't ask you to be faster, sharper, or stronger. Something that lets you be human. Familiar stories are not about the past. They are about emotional safety in the present, about reminding the brain that not everything requires vigilance, that some moments are allowed to simply unfold. That peace doesn't always come from something new. Sometimes it comes from something known, and maybe that's why these stories stay with us. Not because they entertain us the most, but because they meet us exactly where we are when we need them the most.